Hello, hello. Welcome to this Friday afternoon. Well, it's been a while since we streamed last time. So what are we going to do today? Today we want to take a look at some dependency injection, play around with some cool Angular features. So basically, we go on the private and we do npx ng new or add Angular. Let's take the next version, then we have signals. I don't know, we will probably not do anything with signals today, but still if we want it, we would have it. So npx Angular CLI next new inject me. Yeah, it's okay to proceed. Would you like to add Angular routing? I mean, we don't need it. No, we don't need it. Be free. So let's open up WebStorm, which is now looks pretty nice with this new minimalistic UI, I think they call it, or I don't know what they call it. They just call it new UI, but it looks so cool. Private inject me. So, okay, I have two screens open and always opens up on the wrong screen. Okay, good. Here we go. Then what else do we need? Inject me npm run start. Let's also open up a browser tab. All right. Localhost for, yeah. So here we go. Angular is started, cool. Now what do we want to do? So we want to take a look at how basically services are injected in Angular, and especially we want to take a look at the properties. So what you can do is you can write something like, we have various properties when we use dependency injection. So usually we have a constructor or an inject method. We will probably cover both. And then we have optional, so add optional, add host, sorry, it's add optional, right? Something like this, add host, add self, add skip self. So the idea is that basically if you follow this, so that wouldn't be app component, that would be some service, right? So basically, that we then understand what this does, that we know what add optional does, add host, add skip self, and some service. So let's maybe start by just introducing a new service. We call it, I don't know, some service, my service, awesome service. Let's go with awesome.service.ts, right? Which is add injectable. By the way, the font size is probably not big enough. Font size Mellow 20, so 24. Sounds good. So usually what we do is provide it in root. So then we provide it basically in the main injector, right? So awesome service. And then we can have a public property, which is called name, which is just set to foo. Something like this. So now, if we go to our app component and inside here, we would do like private foo, awesome service. Oh, shoot. So we inject our service. Let's forget about the title. And then inside our app component, let's maybe just display, let's get rid of this and let's use an h1 and just display the awesome service.name. Then probably we have to make it public. Yeah, instead of making the whole service public, we should probably just have like a name attribute, which is of types string or undefined. Then inside here we do this.name is equal to this.awesome service.name, right? Something like this. What is the problem with awesome service? Cannot be resolved. It should be. So this so this should actually work now. So we get the name foo, right? Which makes perfect sense. Maybe, oh, this is not so cool in light mode. Let me go to dark mode. So yeah, we get foo. I don't know if you want to have the browser here next. I don't know, probably. Let's see. So yeah, but the point is we get foo, right? And the reason for that is that we basically go up the tree. So the injector tree. So basically what's happening, app component checks, do I provide a awesome service? No. Then he goes up and he finds it on the root injector. So there is the root injector. I think my good friend Christian Kohler, dependency injection. He has like a very nice infographic. Yeah, it's this one. So there we can basically see it very, very well. So what we see is you have an injector, and basically you have like this root injector. And whenever you do provide it in root, you register it on the root injector, and this is the injector hierarchy. So per lazy loaded feature module, you get an injector, but you also get an injector for a component, right? If you have, for example, my component, this would have an injector. Then the parent component has an injector, and then the app component has an injector. You have one per lazy loaded module, and it goes up to the root. And then there's also a platform injector. Platform injector is mainly used when you have something like Angular elements. So what you would do if you want to register something in the platform injector, I think you can use here register platform. But usually we do root. And then you have the null injector, which is the option, the one on top. And you can already see he says that null injector throws an error if no provider is found or returns null. So if nothing is found, then the null injector will throw an error. So let's first see what would happen if we would provide it. Let's say we would have a new component. Let's create a new component. Let's call this bar component.ts. So we say add component. Oh my god. My typing is a bit rusty because I went to the office this week like twice, and then basically whenever I go to the office, I cannot really take my keyboard because everybody is so annoyed because the sound is so loud. So yeah, what we can do, how did we call it? Awesome service, awesome service. So we get a hold of the awesome service, right? And now let's try to refactor the awesome service a bit. Oh my god. Just want to go down here. So let's say we would have a constructor where you get like a name, which is equal to foo if nothing is set. And inside here we say this name is equal to name. So in that case, consider adding a type. Okay, we cannot do it like this because it's provided in root. I'm curious, how can I provide like, so I basically want to provide so with that optional we basically say that this might be null. Yeah, okay, I cannot do it like this because this is dependency injection, right? But what we can do is basically we can do it like this. So let's say we have awesome service, the way we had it previously. And now let's say we have a bar service. Oh my god. And we also have a, so yeah, we have a bar service. And now what would happen, so currently if we inside bar, so we say bar and then as an h2, we would say, of course if we do it like this, the awesome service has to be public. So something like this. This is standalone, so bar component has to be registered inside our app module because our app module isn't yet, our app is not standalone, it's still a module. So we register bar and then inside our app component, we start using bar with a self-closing tag, which is nice. So we get foo bar and then foo. So basically, this is the value, the first foo is the value from the service, bar is the value from the component, the title, and the second foo is again the value from the service. Now what happens if we go to bar and we would say providers, and inside here we have an array and we say provide awesome service, but please use the class bar service and a closing bracket. So now in bar service we should change the name to bar, and we see that we get an instant of bar because and not of foo, right? Let me quickly adjust something. So, good. And the reason why we get that is because we now basically, we walk up the injector tree from bar component and we try to come up with like, we try to find the awesome service and we provide it on the injector of bar and therefore we find bar service. So now, what would happen if you want to inject something that doesn't, I don't know, doesn't exist? That is not provided at all. So let's say we would not provide it here. Then of course we get again foo service because we find it on the root injector. So again, we will get foo. Now what happens if, for example, let's say we have our awesome service, but it's not provided in root. It's just not provided at all. Like you could provide it in a module, but we don't do it here. So what we get here is like we get a null injector. No provider for awesome service. So now what we can do, what is very handy, is the optional. So let me maybe draw this. Let's try to draw this. How is the tool that everybody uses? I think it's called Excalibur. I think it's this one. Okay, but please dark mode. How can I have dark mode here? Probably under settings. Much better, right? So now, can I start drawing? I have never used it. Okay, good. So what we do here, we have basically now, what we currently have is we have a, how can I add text? We have an app component. So that's our app component. And inside the app component, we currently have bar component, right? And now what we have is basically, we have a token, basically the awesome service, or we have, yeah, I don't know if this is the best way to draw it. But we have our awesome service. And what we now do, we did once provide it here with bar, basically. Actually, it's more like we had bar service, which was provided as the awesome service here. And then the awesome service was provided in root, which is basically the top level injector. I don't know, like let's say we do it here. This would be, oh no. This would be somewhere here, like that's basically then the root injector. So that would be provided here. Now what we did basically with this code change, we cut all the lines. So we don't provide bar service and we do not provide awesome service. So now what basically happens, bar is basically requiring in its constructor. So here, right here we do, this is some pseudocode, but that's basically what we do. We inject bar service here. Oh my, yeah, I cannot make it really smaller. Yeah, but we inject it here. So we walk up and check, is it on bar? No. So we go one up, is it on app? No. So we go one up, is it on root? And then there's even one level on top, which is basically, okay, we still have, if you check the infographic, we still check, is it provided on platform? And then we still go up and we check, is it provided in null? Like, is it provided in null? Doesn't make sense, but that's a null injector. So actually we go like this. Then we go like, how can I draw another one? Oh my god, this is an arrow here. Then we go here. Then we go here. And then of course, one more up. And then till here. So I would say now if we would come and have our awesome service and just do like provide it in, and we would do platform. So in our application, we would get it, right? Because it's one level above the root injector. So it's one up. So we would not find it on bar, we would not find it on app, we would not find it on root, we would find it on platform. And of course, if we don't provide it anywhere, we don't get it, and therefore we get this error. Now, of course, this is not super robust. And there are scenarios where so usually you will never run into this because it's always provided in root. But there are scenarios, especially when you work then with dependency injection, not with dependency injection, with content projection, because you cannot only inject services, you can also inject components, right? So we have view child, for example, to access components that are projected, but in some scenarios also the projected component needs access to the parent component, or let's say you have a directive and you want to access the host. You can get those instances via dependency injection. And in such cases, if you want to make your component robust and like reusable, let's say you have a component that needs access to the parent, but it can be used inside foo, it can be used inside bar, inside bash, so it can be projected in multiple contexts. Then you don't know if the parent is always available, or you can also make it maybe You can even use it standalone. So in such cases, what you want to do is you want to say here inside bar, you want to put the add optional. And with add optional, basically it will not complain if this shouldn't complain if awesome service is not there, but it probably complains that null injector awesome service. Yeah, this comes from the null injector, but we said add optional. Did we also use it in inside? Yeah, okay, this is the problem, sorry. So here we would let's quickly forget about the app component. So let's just say name is, I don't know, app title, for example. So now we see that we get a different error. We don't get like that the provider is not there. We just get cannot read properties null. And that's because we say here awesome service.name. So let's say we want to display a default name. So what we can do is probably like this, brackets, or I don't know, default. So what we get now is default, which is the default we just provided because app service is null, right? So here we can still improve that code, but you get the idea. So now let's look at some of the, so that's add optional actually. Now let's see, so basically what you should take away from here is by default, we hop up until we find our service somewhere. So that's the default behavior. Now, let's say we want to display bar. So let's maybe add here another title. Where's the title? Is it this one? So that would be default. Now, let's take a look at self. So let's call it add. So add self. So what does add self do? So let's again say we have our app component. Inside app component, we have a bar component. And then again we have like, so let's maybe refactor this a bit. Let's say we have a new file, awesome service.ts, and we say awesome service, which is just an interface and just says you need to have a name string. And now we do like let's refactor this to full service. Oh my, yeah. Yeah, so we need to have the name. So that's basically now the full service. And let's go to the bar service. So now, name bar. Good. So now what we can do is basically we can take a look at how we want to provide those services. So let's say we have the bar component and we inject awesome service. And Yeah. So we import this, and here we add providers. Provide. Use class. Something like this. Oh my god. Didn't I call it awesome service? Why is the element is not accessible? Ah, no, but that should, I don't know if this is an IDE issue or not. Let's go to our app component. Cannot find awesome service. Bar component does not appear to be an engine module class. Okay. Providers. Does this need to be, probably this has, I thought it's also working with interfaces, to be honest. Let's quickly check. Otherwise we will create an abstract class. And the Angular provide interface and Angular Dependency Injection. Yeah, that's basically the interface. Providers provide API service. Yeah, that's exactly what we do. Unfortunately this does not work. Okay, we have to refactor this into an abstract class. No worries. Bar component, so now we are good. We are good. Like, good. So let's see what this does. Name has no initializer. Yeah, awesome service TS. So then we have to say it's string or undefined. Yeah, now we see, maybe we should not display app title in app component. So we get public awesome service, and inside the app component we do. So now we get foo, and let's maybe quickly adjust this in a way that that we have a bit better overview. So this would be app component, then we have the service name, and the same for bar. So for bar we would do like bar component, and then we have the service name. So we see on app component we get foo, on bar component we get bar. And that's because by default bar tries to resolve up until he finds a provider. Now let's see what happens if we remove this. So if we do not provide it on bar, so what will happen is we will get foo as well, because right, he goes up the dependency, so basically the injector tree, he goes up and he finds, it's not really a, is it a tree? Yeah, he goes up and he finds then the provider that is registered on app component. Now let's take a look at the add self, because that's what we want to check. So what happens if we do add self? So if we say add self on bar, we will get nothing. we will get an error because no provider for awesome service found in node injector. So that means what is happening is bar, also we should maybe draw here, basically this would be bar service. So they are both registered as awesome service, right? But we still distinguish between them. Would be foo service. So what is happening? Foo service is registered on the app component. Oh my, whoopsie. That's a beautiful arrow. And bar service is registered on bar component. And basically what is happening when we use I want to make a text. So when we use at self, what happens is he will go up and check on bar. So he will only check here, does bar provide the bar service? And if yes, then we will stop here. So we will now not go further up. So basically, therefore, if we do this and no service is provided, we will get an error. What we of course can do is put in that add optional, right? And then it works, everything works fine. So now, the next one I want to show you is add skip self. And probably now that we know self, this should be pretty straightforward because the image looks the same. So now what is happening is in default, oh, I forgot to copy foo. Let me also quickly redraw that arrow because it's way too ugly. Also, people, don't forget to drink. It's super important. I got this really nice bottle that was sent to me by Google, which is pretty cool. Because the bottle actually has like multiple of those water drops on it. And whenever you drink, you basically have to increase the water drop. So at the end of the day, you see how much you drank. Which is very nice. So yeah, so skip self. Let's take this example again, and let's again come here and add providers for not use value null, but bar service. So we provide bar service on this level, and let's stick with the default. So when we use the default behavior, what we get is bar service on awesome service name, provide us bar service name bar component. Why do we get their bar service? Because we provide with use value and not with use class. So yeah, so we have bar component, then we have bar, and we have foo. And now this is basically the default behavior. So we get bar on bar and foo on the app component because yeah, we look up and we find bar, so we display bar. So now if we skip self, if we do here a skip self, then what we will see is interesting because we see foo on both. So what is happening here is that we basically skip our own injector and just go directly up. So we will not, this arrow has to be redrawn because the arrow now looks more like this. So we will go out and we will check it on the app component. So that's how skip self behaves. Now, there is one more, which is basically, so we saw self, we saw optional, we saw skip self, and there is one more, which is host. And that's an interesting one because host basically is like, it looks like self. So it basically checks on the component itself if there's a provider. So maybe let's also illustrate that. So you see self just goes to bar. It's actually pretty similar to this. Let's take that here and let's use add host. And the thing that is happening when you use add host is basically you display bar because you find bar. And if bar wouldn't be provided, you would get an error because you cannot find it on bar. So you might think, isn't this the same as with self? And it's almost kinda, but host doesn't stop here actually. It looks one further than self. So self only looks on the component, but host actually goes further because host even goes one more up and checks there as well. So basically, host just checks the component itself, like self, but then also the host component. And what are the scenarios where you can have a host component? So the scenarios where you can have a host component, there are two scenarios. One is directive, because a directive is applied on a host, and the second one is content projection. So let's illustrate an example with content projection and the directive. Let's go with both. So let's say we have the bar component and bar component again. Let's add the providers again. So bar component provides the bar service, right? And now we can have a new example or blue.directive, whatever. Blue.directive.ts or let's just let's go with blue directive. So this is directive and the selector is blue, and basically inside here what we want to do is blue directive, and you want to say at host binding style color blue. Exactly, perfect. Thank you, GitHub Copilot. Let's make it standalone true. Let's register it. Oh my god, wrong key. Then let's go to the app component HTML and let's put blue on it. Now we see that the text turns blue, right? So we have a blue bar component, and now inside our blue directive, if you would go inside here and do constructor, and then we say private awesome service, let's do it like this, and then we say just console log blue directive awesome service name. Thank you Copilot, I don't have to do anything here. And now let's say add self. So this will throw an error because it's not provided on the blue directive. So we still get bar, okay. So we still get bar because I would have expected that this froze actually, because I thought that awesome service is not provided here. So what if we would do bar component, and let's go here and foo service. So then we cannot provide this on a directive. Yeah, so we cannot do this here, actually. But with add self, you still get the injector from bar, which is actually... Oh, no. I'm just in the wrong file. Sorry. Because this has to work, right? Yeah. So you get foo then as a name. And on bar, but the interesting thing now is, you see how they overwrite each other. So, because this one, the blue directive only turns the text blue. But the foo, so basically bar component now also displays foo, because add self, in bar we just say add host. But even with default one, I think it now gets foo. Yeah, it still gets foo. But if we don't provide it inside the component, inside the directive, it won't get foo. It will get bar. You see that? So basically it overrides it. So that's very interesting. But still we haven't clarified the difference between self and host. So then forget about what I said about the directive scenario. It seems like they behave exactly the same for the directive, for the attribute directive. So let's take a look at content projection. Let's say we have a container component. Let's say we have just that. And this is just a component. That's a container component, standalone true. Isn't this one? No. Container true, and inside here we have a div. And this div has some style, I don't know, border 1 pixel, solid black, whatever. And inside here we have a ng content, so there we accept the ng content. So we say we accept container component, then of course our container component is provided inside our app module. So container component, and we called it container. So inside our app component, we do now container, and now we use content projection. So we take bar and we project it down to container, and now it has this nice border because it's inside the container. But the interesting thing now is, so blue directive still gets bar. That makes sense. And now, what's happening if we remove this from bar? Then we get an error because no provider is found. Makes sense. Now let's say we do add host. Or let's first go, yeah. Let's first go, no, sorry, I'm just thinking what's the best way to illustrate. So we do add host, and we do this inside our container. So inside our container, we provide this. No providers find more. This isn't the app component. Yeah. But there is foo service. So let's remove that. Did we somehow broke something with the blue directive? Because blue, yeah, here it fails because blue. Okay, let's quickly forget about the blue directive because there are too many concepts coming together. So let's just stick with let's not apply blue. So let's go like this. And now we see that we have bar displayed. And that's basically currently because we have it on the container. If we remove it, of course, we will get foo. But now the thing that I want to show you is that we currently get it. But on bar, if we would do add host, and we would not provide a service here, we can see that we get an error because, right, it goes up on bar, and then the graphic is actually no longer correct because there is one more component. It's this one here. And this component here is actually our container. So now what's happening, bar goes up, so self, that's not self, that's then at host. At host goes up to bar. So is there a provider on bar? Let's see. So if we go to bar component, no, there is no provider on bar. So then self would stop here. What's happening with at host goes one further up. So at host goes here and then checks on the container if it's there. So is it on the container? No, it's not provided there, but let's add it. And what will we get? If we add it, we will get bar. So now, if we would use add self here, add self would actually not work because add self, like shown in the drawing, stops at bar. So if you check self, it stops here. It doesn't go any further. And basically that's how it works. So this graphic now that I see is also not correct because default would be like this. Or no, it's actually correct, but with add optional, let's maybe do it like, or maybe let me also check the infographic. The null injector throws an error. Yeah, so it goes to the null injector. I wanted to check if default it goes, but basically if we would say throws error unless we use, right? So that's actually the behavior. And yeah, the difference between host and self is self goes to the bar component and no further. And host goes to bar and then even to container. So if we have a container. All good. So I think those are all the scenarios. And now sure, you can basically, you will even understand this kind of stuff. So if you have add optional, add host, add skip, self, my service, and then, oh, yeah, and here you would have the awesome service, right? You should now understand these kind of things inside the constructor. So, cool. Next, what we want to check is in Angular, we now not only have dependency injection via constructor, right? So we also have private, let's call it awesome service, and it's not like this, but it's inject. And what we can do is awesome service. It's not private then, it's just a property. So if you do it like this, we get foo and bar because, yeah, we go up, we find this one on the container, and so on. But let's now say we want to use, I think there are some options. So how is this meant to be used with? So we can say host true. That should still not change. But if we leave it away, so this is the default injection, right? So if we go to the container and we remove the providers, we should get foo service. Yeah, we get foo displayed. So now we basically, at this point, we can probably integrate those two in the same screen so that we have it nicely together. Oh my. So we can see it here, bar component, foo. Let's maybe also add some padding to the body. I don't know. Padding of 20 pixels or something. Yeah. Then also the container. Sorry, this is like... But it stresses me somehow. Now we have some padding in the container, so this looks much better. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to do the same with inject. Bar component, inject. So we get foo. Now if we would say add host true, because the container doesn't provide it. So let's first try to go with self true. So this should throw. And it does. So this throws an error. No provider found. Yeah. So no provider found makes sense. Now, if we say optional true, doesn't throw, we just get default. And if we say host true, we get default because it's still optional. If we would remove the optional, we would get an error. Yeah. And then what we also can do is skip self. So skip self, I quickly want to illustrate this. So if you would have add host true, and we would come here and say on bar, providers, then of course we add an array, and then we do provide awesome service, foo service. Now we have host true, we get foo because we find it on the component itself. But if we drop in a skip self, we will get bar because we skip ourselves and we get up to the container. We don't get bar because it's not provided on the container, I guess. Yeah. But if you would provide it here, so if you would add here providers, something like this, then we will get bar here. Right. So we can use this also with inject. So that's pretty cool. Good. So the last thing I want to show you is basically injection via components. So let's say we have this container, and inside this container we project bar at the moment. So what we can do is to get a hold of bar or of all the bar components. So we can actually say add content child, and then we say bar component, and we call this bar component. So this will be our content child. This will be available inside the after content init lifecycle hook. So inside here we should be able to access bar component, this dot bar component. Errors while is the type not correct, and it's not definite. Oh, It's not definitely assigned in the constructor. I hate this error. I hate it so much. It's so annoying. But yeah, good. So we see that we get bar component. So we get bar component, we see that it's injecting the awesome service. So let's say if we would have, I don't know, if you would have here on the bar component some public, call me maybe, console log, and then called. Let's say it like this. And then what we can do here is we can say this bar component dot call me maybe. And we will see that we get called. So that's if you would project multiple bar components. So if you would do something like, oh no, something like this, then we would see that we have like multiple bar components projected. And then in content child we could also get like content children, and this is then basically a query list of bar, oh my god, bar components, let's call it bar components. And then what we could do is like inside, let's quickly do something. Let's add here like a counter equals to 0. So probably we should use a let. And then do we have a constructor? No, we don't have a constructor. Oh my. Counter plus plus called on number. Let's just call it no copilot, just like this. So now inside our, we don't have content child, we have content children. This dot bar components, and then what we can do to array for each bar component that call me maybe, and boom, here we go, called on number 2 times called on number 2. Yeah, because it's already incremented, so this will not work. Actually, what we should do, so yeah, called on number 1, called on number 2, right? So we successfully did that. So that's basically an API how you can get a hold of some projected content. Of course, if you have it in the same component, you can also use view child and view children. It's basically the same. But what I actually wanted to show is how can bar call the container? So usually you shouldn't do this. So always like one direction data flow, because that's an exact case where you will get the famous expression changed after it has been checked error in Angular. But let's still go for it. So let's say we have the container component. Let's go to bar component. So let's get rid of this. And now what you can say, so that's also on the container, we will add a, let's just quickly take this one, the call me maybe. So let's get rid of the counter. Do we still have the counter here? We still have. So private bar component. And then we can say, not bar, of course we are in bar. Container component. this.container.callMeMaybe. And inside there we will say container is called or something. What? Isn't... What? Ah, okay. Okay, I don't know. Now. Container called. So. Container is called twice because we project bar twice. But you can see how we call the container, which is great. So let's also get rid of this and let's just focus on this. So this is great, but so we call the container, but what happens now if you use bar outside of the container? Well, you guessed right that we don't get access to the container component. So how can you solve this? So the way you can solve this, also, by the way, you can, instead of dependency injection via constructor, you could also get like just inside the constructor we could do inject container component dot call me maybe, and we don't need this and we don't need this, and this should still work. So this will still work. So that's great. Container called. I don't know if I can bump the font size of the console, but yeah, if you cannot read it, just believe me, container is called. Good. So yeah, what happens if we use bar outside? It breaks null injector. So for those who followed the stream from the beginning, you know how to fix this now, because what you can do is you can say optional true, then probably you have to put in a question mark here, and then everything works, it's robust. And bar can either be used alone, or once it's used inside the container, then you will get container called. So it's pretty robust now. But now, what's happening if we create like a dashed container dot component dot ts, and the dashed container component is actually the same as the container component. So let's take the exact same code and paste it in here, and then we say this is dashed container. And now the container component is a dashed container component, and now the call me maybe is dashed container called. So it's a standalone component. We probably have to register it. Trying to navigate. Oh my. What am I doing? What am I doing? So, sorry. Again, my typing is a bit rusty, actually. So dash container component. So we successfully registered the dashed container component. Now let's go to our app component HTML, and we also use the dashed container. And now we want to use bar inside the dash container. So what's happening is, let's also for the dash, we should probably adjust the style, which IDE hides. Solid. Is that dashed? Yeah. So the second one is our dashed container. And now container called, but only once. Dashed container is never called, even though the method is call me maybe. So bar is now at this moment hyper optimized to work inside inside the container component. So now what we should do even generally, it would be a good practice to add a interface, right? So that those both have like the same method. And sorry for that. So the way we can do is, again, it's pretty, it's actually the same, or from concept wise, it's the same as we did previously with the interface. So we couldn't provide an interface, we had to do an abstract class. And that's the same thing that we should do. So we have like, maybe our container shouldn't even be named container. It should be like solid container component. So we call it solid container component. We also call it solid container in its selector. We probably broke everything. Solid container, app component, solid container. So now it's working again. Good. So what we should do, we should have a general abstract class called container.component.ts. And that's just a abstract class container component, right? And this container component actually defines a public call me maybe method. Yeah, and now both of course have to implement a container. So the solid container has to say implements container component, and then isn't it? Call me maybe is a function that returns void, yeah. And then what did I wanted to do? I wanted to go to the dash container, implements container component, yeah. So dash container called. Now, yeah, var component, of course, will now not inject the solid container, but it will inject the container component, actually. And then just call me maybe. And this will not work. Why? Because, okay, call me maybe has no initializer and is not. No. Do we have to say this is either this or undefined, so the TypeScript is happy? Yeah. Container. So I think the issue here, I don't know if this error is fully correct, but the problem is that we didn't provide, so this is an abstract class, right? There's no instance of this. So we didn't provide anything. So what we have to do on the dashed container is we have to say provide container component, and then actually what we could do is use class solid container component, but this should give us a circular dependency actually. What? Quickly have to check what's. So probably we should say is it yeah. So solid container is still called I'm just checking. Yeah, because it's actually provided, right? Because we provide it. So if we would remove it here, it's not called. So we have to provide it. And I actually thought that we have to use forward ref here, but it seems to work without. And then the same for the dash container. And now we see that container called and dash container called. So both methods are actually called because we provided them now as a container component. And now bar can be used in those containers, which basically inherit all those interfaces, container component. Or, as we saw, bar can also be safely used outside without throwing an error because we made it optional. And that's a way to not only inject services, but also inject components. So I think that's a pretty cool approach from Angular. So I think that's everything I wanted to show today about dependency injection. Yeah. If there are any questions, or if somebody has something he still wants to see or to know, like, feel free to drop it in the chat. If not, then we will probably finish here and enjoy the weekend. So yeah, I won't see any questions. So then thanks everybody for joining. Wish you a great weekend, and yeah, hope to see you soon. Bye bye.